Hey, Banditos, it's Wednesday, so that must mean you're probably like us and you're trying to get over the hump of the week. Well, have no fear. The Dollar Bandits are here, and we're going to make that hump day a little less painful. I am Joe Marcello.
I'm Warren Phillips.
I'm Mike Farah.
And today we have a great show in store for you. We're bringing you our interview with a real honest to goodness movie star. We're talking about none other than director, producer, and collector Daniel Roebuck. Now, chances are you've seen his work in Lost, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., any of the Rob Zombie movies lately. Currently, he is the Count on the Munsters series on Netflix. But look, let's be honest. If you've ever watched TV, movies, or anything, chances are you've probably seen him.
Yeah, I remember him from U.S. Marshals, The Fugitive, and just following him on Facebook, you see how much he loves the old horror movies and the collections that goes with it. So getting a chance to talk to him, I wish I could have been there. I had some house problems, but I'm so glad Joe came in and hit a grand slam, and this is really a fun one.
Yep, Just Joe episode. Very exciting. We love it when they come together like this. So I know Daniel Roebuck mostly from the aforementioned Lost, where he played Dr. Leslie Arts, or as it should be pronounced, Arzd. But yeah, he was a great sort of secondary character. Blew up handling dynamite. You can't get better than that for an on-screen death. And would love to hear more about what he has to say about his Hollywood career. So let's get to it. It's Daniel Roebuck.
Again, thank you for joining us. I'm going to start off with the same question we ask everyone. And when did you first discover comics?
Oh, comics, gosh. Well, I couldn't tell you. Before comics, I discovered comic characters. And we were just before we were going, I was showing this beautiful Captain Action thing. I actually am at the airport. You might hear the plane landing. I don't know why that is. So when I was a kid, I would go to the store and I would see this. And I knew who Batman was, obviously, because he was on TV. And I knew who Superman was because he was on TV. Although, odd that Superman's not on this, but he was certainly a character.
Yeah, he is up in the corner. Yeah,
right. So it was through this toy, and this toy was a thing called Captain Action. And what you're actually looking at is the costume that you would buy to put on an action figure, not a doll, mother, on an action figure named Captain Action. And I'm 59. And so Captain Action, unlike G.I. Joe, only lived for 2 years. So you had to be 6 or 5 between 68 and 69, and then you got to play with this. If you were 10, you were past this. So that's how I first got into comics, because I was playing with Captain Action. And the genius thing was Captain Action came with a little mini comic that said, here's the other costumes you could buy. And we would stare at it. So what do I remember buying? You know, the first comics I remember buying weren't superheroes, because I would borrow them from someone else. The first comics I would buy were Plop. Remember the Sergio Aragones and Jack Davis drawings? It was a DC title. Plop.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we had
so that's what I remember.
So we had one of our guests in the early on. He used to drive around the DC van and would sell issues of that out of the DC. It was more or less like I would say food truck style, and he would drive around neighborhoods in New York on the east side and the boroughs and just
this
sell.
Is blowing
comics.
my mind that this existed for real.
It did. Didn't last very long. And
why not?
I want
to do that now.
I'm terrible with names, so his name escapes me at the moment. But he was in charge of that when early on in his DC career, and I remember him distinctly saying that that was one of the comics that was selling.
I liked I was such a TV fanatic that my grandmother's house, for whatever reason, there were Munsters comics and Car 54 comics, you know, when they would do comic versions of the TV shows. So I was enamored by those. I love those because in the comics you finally saw what Spot kind of looked like, and you didn't see it in the show. And then I remember buying a lot of Boris Karloff Presents and Ripley's Believe It or Not. So these really weird off titles.
Those are
I don't know
great.
how to explain it, but that was kind of it was more like reading nonfiction. I don't know, instead of a comic book.
Did you ever kind of dive into or look into some like the Vault of Horror or, you know, Tales from the Crypt type stuff?
Yeah, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror. Kind of oddly, I'm sorry, my image keeps getting darker and lighter. I don't know why that is. There was comic style magazines, Creepy, Eerie, Vampirilla. I was kind of drawn quickly to that. But I was also thinking of when I got older, I had the blessing to have the greatest best friend ever. I met him when I was 15 years old, I think, Scotty Brunel, and I was the monster guy and he was the comic guy. So Scotty was always my comic guru, and it worked out great for me because once the story was done, he would let me borrow it, and I didn't have to wait every month like you schnooks. I got to read it all at one time, long before they put them in graphic novels. Scott made my own graphic novels, but I remember back in the 80s, the great Alan Moore, everything Alan Moore did. Miracle Man, was that Alan Moore? Miracle Man.
Yes.
And of course, Watchmen.
Yes.
And that the run he did on Swamp Thing.
Oh, love that. Absolutely love that.
As good as good. I pull those out all the time. I have all of those and I read those often.
So yeah, they're part of, I mean, I love the Swamp Thing. That was one of the earliest comics that I read before I was really into comics. And I just thought, because at the time, Swamp Thing had come back around, being more, you know, it was a series, and then it was also a series of, or a couple of movies. So I remember being into it.
It was movies and a TV show.
And a TV show, which was
late 80s,
which was quite 90s. Interesting. And read the comic, and I was like, the comic is way better.
The TV show was a low budget. It was like Superboy. It was just a low budget production.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know how I always consider horror and comics kind of adjacent to one another, because they're closely aligned. I think they're so, you know, it's very much escapism from, you know, everything that we have to deal with, and it's so much fun.
Escapism from everything we have to deal with when we're 7.
Yeah. Well, everything else, you know, certainly now.
Miserable.
Life is hard. I gotta learn math.
No, now, believe me.
Yeah.
Now we should. In fact, that might be the placebo of life. We should distribute a comic to everybody.
I agree. It should be mandatory.
So down.
How important were...
but it shouldn't, we can't let the government decide.
Oh, I agree 100%. How important were monsters to you growing up?
Gosh, it was everything. It was everything. Once I discovered the Universal Monsters, and it was interesting, Joe, like I talk from an actor's perspective. When, like, you love comic books, but when do you realize that somebody writes them? You know, when do you realize that it's written and then painted and then or drawn and then painted? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like we don't know this stuff. So I would watch movies. Did you know when you're a little kid what an actor is? I don't know, that they didn't just say the words. No, there's a script. So I remember I always say it was that the Karloff, Lugosi, Chaney Jr. especially, where I would see them play different characters. So here's Karloff is the monster, And in this one, well, he's kind of like Dr. Frankenstein. He's Dr. Niemann. And in this one, he's has an invisible ray. And here's Lugosi as Dracula. Wait, now he's Igor. Like I started realizing the actors were playing parts. And that was the epiphany of my life. That's actors who do that, you know. So from that moment on, I was hooked. And admittedly, we all escaped where we escaped. Your listeners and watchers, you guys went into comics. I really did go deep dive into TV and movies, and not just Universal monster movies. Like from an early age,
Mhm.
I would, if something interested me, I would watch it.
Yeah.
Geez, I even remember, now this isn't an early age, it was 1974, 75 when Cuckoo's Nest came out, and it had already run and it was playing at Northampton College. And I wanted to go see it. And my dad was like, "What? Why? I don't understand why you want to see this. So what? This has nothing to do with you." And I was like, I want to see it. I don't know what to tell you." Because I just knew I had to see it. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. No.
And so, yeah. So anyway, they are, I think, because it's storytelling, isn't it? And it's magic and make believe and all that stuff. And
Mhm.
you know, Superman can fly, and so can Dracula. You
Right.
know, because he's a bat.
Was your love for horror, is that kind of what drew you to working with Rob Zombie?
Well, what drew me to working with Rob Zombie is he's nice enough to offer me parts. Uh, you know, I'd work with everybody. I wonder if I would work with Woody Allen. That's the big question. You know, where you're like, if noted child molester Woody Allen wanted, you know, and you'd be like, he's a
Yeah.
really good director. He's a really good director. Um, I don't think he's going to ask me to work with him, but um, uh, I made that stupid joke and I lost my train of thought. What did you ask me, Joe?
I was asking if your love of horror, certainly classic horror, got you.
Oh,
Is it
drew
what
me to
drew
Rob
you to?
Zombie.
Yeah.
So no, well, we met each other. He was buying toys, models in a model, like a Kidcraft model place, like where they
Okay.
put models together of monsters or superheroes, or whatever. That's where I met him. Then I met him again at a screening of Elvira's Hidden Hills. And so he knew me and he knew of my love for monsters. And by the way, by that point, I had already written many articles for these monster magazines about movies and monsters and makeup and amusement parks. I was always writing articles or something. You know, there's some actors who just act and then they wait for the phone to ring. I don't know a lot of actors like me, but if the phone's not ringing, I'm calling someone else and finding a way to give them a job.
That's really
You
interesting.
know,
I mean, I know like a
yeah,
lot of
I
actors,
just
like I'm just going to be an actor and this is what I'm going to do. But I always find it interesting for those
yeah.
people that do other stuff. I mean, because you have more than one interest in life. You know,
Oh
who's to
gosh,
say that you
yes.
can't do all of it?
And by the way, you know, okay, so let's say my interest in Universal Monsters and Captain Action is really silly. You know, why would I need to collect this my entire life? Why do I have this? Why do I actually have three of these? I have these because I love them and I love figural toys and I love the Munsters. But do I love them because one day God was going to make sure that I'd be ready to be this degree, right? So I spent a lifetime collecting and
Hmm.
now I've become a toy, right? So I look at it like I'm never embarrassed by what I am, and I've never been. And I think the reward for that is being able to work in this miraculous world. I'm just going to show you something.
Hmm.
When I was a child, I was that card says the Count. I don't know if
Yeah.
it maybe
Yeah.
it turns it around. So
I can see it.
I was a clown magician, and I was in a circus, and I had to come up with a character, and so I came up with this vampire clown, and I named him the Count.
I see it. Yeah.
God, such an idiot. All right. And then, and then, 40 years later,
And there you are
like
doing it
that's my
professionally.
life. And I mean, look at it.
That's
Thank
awesome.
God I wasn't embarrassed by who I was, because all along, the intent was that this is who I was supposed to be.
That's awesome.
So, you know, uh, so I met Rob, and then we hit it off, and then I think I'm an okay actor, and then he puts me in movies.
Some really major movies. I mean, come on, let's be honest. Halloween.
And then, yeah, when I'm
Holy
not working
crap.
for him, I am working for a lot of people. Look, God is good to me. I've been very lucky, and I've worked in every genre. And at this point, I can't even keep track of all of the, what do you call those? All those IPs or storylines.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm in the Marvel universe, the Star Wars universe, the Star Trek universe, the
Yep.
universe. I'm now a universal monster. I'm the exact thing that I
You're-
loved the most as a child. I'm a transformer. I'm in Phantasm. I'm in Halloween. Uh, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I've loved since I was a little boy that God gave back to me as an adult. I used to be an impressionist. How weird is this, Joe? I used to be an impressionist, and my mom, I had the best mom. So your dad thinks you're mentally handicapped, but your mom, you'll never have a better agent than your mom. So
Yes.
I'm walking around, you dirty rat, I'm doing Cagney, and I'm doing, but I'm doing, I'm doing all the classic characters, and my mom takes me to see Rich Little when I'm
Oh,
12 years old, right? About the same time that I was dressing up as a clown. And then I went to go meet him afterwards, and I had my program, and he signed my program. And then it wasn't, let's see, 30, 12. It wasn't 20 years later. It was only 18 years later. I go to the set of The Late Shift, and I'm playing Jay Leno, and Rich Little's playing Johnny Carson, and I'm doing an impression. And I told him when I was a kid, I want to be an impressionist. He thought, just like my dad, kid's mentally handicapped. But there we were. And I pulled out my book, and I was like, Rich, you signed this when I was. He couldn't even, he couldn't, he was like this. He goes, I just blows my mind. So he signed the book again, and he wrote on it, Dan, I always knew we'd end up working together.
that's awesome. I'm glad you mentioned The Late Shift, because that is the first role that I remember seeing you in. And I mean, it's very possible I saw you in others, because I watched a lot of television growing up.
Yeah.
But that stuck out in my head because I remember as a child, that was a big deal. That whole
Yeah.
David Letterman, Jay Leno saga was a big deal. And when they made that movie, I watched it. And I remember you as Jay Leno. And I'm glad you mentioned trying to do impressions or doing impressions, because I would try to do impressions of Jay Leno after watching that as a child. And
It's funny. So you were doing me doing him.
I was just doing, what I heard as Jay Leno, like, that, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And I just, my parents would laugh at me, but that show always stuck with me because I always found it super interesting. And I was always wondering, like,
Such a great story.
It really was.
Show the audience that.
Yes.
It was such a great story of, I got in a lot of trouble. The late Ivan Reitman did not like, I said, oh, they're like, these people, they're like mobsters. And that was quoted in an LA Times interview. And, they used that to get him a little steam. They said, well, Dan Roebuck says it's about mobsters. And he was like, it's not about mobsters, like then he was all mad at me. But they're everybody's making threats. And so it was crazy. Here's the great thing. I played the great guy. Imagine the other actor who's a great actor, John Michael Higgins. He had to play freaking David Letterman. What a goofball David Letterman is. A lying, cheating, stealing, intern molesting hypocrite. I played the nice guy. And did you know that?
No, I'm going.
Do you remember that they put John Michael Higgins on David Letterman's show, and then they didn't really put him on. He humiliated him on public television. Yeah, he kept asking Julia Roberts about so what's your recipe for a good meatloaf? Like making a point of showing the audience that he was stalling.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the show, he goes, well, we don't have any time to bring out John Michael Higgins, who plays me in The Late Shift, but you can meet him in the lobby after the show.
Oh, I don't remember that at all.
Horrible.
Wow.
Horrible human being. And John Michael Higgins, he should kiss the ground John Michael Higgins walks on. Such a great actor.
Was there, I mean, I guess you answered the question before I asked it, but at the time when you were taking that role, were you concerned about backlash, maybe towards, from these guys to you, they won't let you on their show?
Well, it's a good question, and I should have been, but I'm not that bright. You're smarter than I am, obviously. We were, in fact, I was not allowed to be on the Tonight Show, but it did spurn a friendship with Jay Leno, who, although I couldn't be on the Tonight Show, he's always been there for me. Great guy. I produced an animated Christmas movie, and he played he's the narrator of the movie. And I mean, shit, man, I got a lot done because of that movie. And what's weird is the guy, remember the guy that was portrayed the head of NBC, blocked that movie so it could not ever be shown on they didn't talk about it on the news. Warren Littlefield was his name.
Yeah,
didn't talk about it anywhere. But 2 years later, he was no longer the head of NBC, and he had a TV comedy, and he tried to put John Michael Higgins and me in this TV comedy. So you never know what's gonna happen. He turned out to be a great guy. But
oh wow,
when the thing came out, he was not going to be publicly humiliated. But a nice man, Warren Littlefield.
Wow,
smart. Weird. They are like mobsters.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that going around now. That's for sure.
What if when somebody was being a douche to you, and they were like, "Let me tell you something. You're ruining this," and you were just like,
"Pew pew." Trust me, there are a lot of people in high school I would love to have done that too.
What would they say?
I don't, So going back to your collection, which is extensive and amazing. Clearly, you've amassed quite the collection over the years.
Well,
are you looking at? If you're looking at older videos, I actually had an epiphanal moment. Joe, do you have kids?
I do.
Do you have kids?
Yep.
3. Good man. Good man.
7-year-old twins and 27-year-old. So yeah.
Oh, good. So you've done it twice now.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah, you've done it twice. So once you've made people, as you and I have, we're creators of humans.
Yes.
Once you create another human being, something happens and you figure stuff out. And I had a vast collection. So if people see a videotape of my collection online where there's multiple rooms and I'm with Tyler Main or some other people, that was a collection I had up until 12 years ago.
Okay.
And one day I'm driving home. My son was playing football very good athlete. My son, I have a son and a daughter, and Buster's the younger one. He was 13, and I was getting ready, when watching the game, and I get up and I start pulling. And my wife goes at the time, "Where are you going?" I said, "Oh, there's some people coming in from Wisconsin to see the toy collection." And so I got to go show them the toys. And my wife was like, oh, okay, all right. And I'm driving home, and I start thinking, I'm leaving my son's 13th year to go celebrate my 13th year with complete strangers. Like, the narcissism to me struck very deeply, very deeply. And like, having my collection was great because I put my kids through Catholic school and I put them through college when they went. My son stopped at some point, but there was always something on the shelf that if I needed to, because the actor's life isn't always glory. If I needed to, there was always some way to make some money to pay the tuition or whatever. But I just felt like enough is enough.
Mhm.
So I kept what I liked and I sold 3/4 of it away because it had become an anchor to me and it had taken my time away from my family to some extent. Now you've got a different situation, Joe, because you're creating an entertainment. You've got this thing. It's important that you're up to date on it. So that's good. If I had a full-time job where I talked about Captain Action, um, then I would have as much stuff. But I don't need as much stuff. And once I got rid of the bulk of my stuff, my God, I was so free emotionally. And I've written and directed 3 movies since that time. To write and direct 1 movie in 12 years is a big deal. To do it 3 times, now we're starting to get ready to direct the 4th movie. I mean,
That's
it's
pretty.
there's some good coming of this.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
But the collection, if you see it in those cases, all the masks,
Yeah.
all the toys, the life-size figures,
Oh, it's
it's so great.
as someone who collects things, and I come from a family of collectors because my parents used to do the same.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like, my dad with old tools and stuff like that, which I have since inherited, which is awesome. But my mother with antiques, my wife has her own collection of things. I think every collector strives to have what you have because you have things that are of major significance. Like I've, whether it's what you have now or what you had in the past. I mean, you have like screen used items, you have memorabilia from, shows that are no longer in existence. Now, I think collectors, they make the stuff that people have that are more or less instant collectibles, really nice, fancy, action figures and things like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And, there are websites of people who just spend thousands of dollars on these really fancy, like the sideshow collectibles, stuff,
Which are
is
beautiful.
amazing. But
They're amazing.
will it be like the mask from from like a Twilight Zone episode, or like Bela Lugosi's cast that you have, which is just bananas, by the way.
I just have this eclectic. That what I kept was what I liked the most.
Mhm.
And sometimes someone will say, I got a guy called me, goes, I have something you can't say no to. And I was like, please, I don't collect anymore. I can say no. Wait do you see how fast I can say no? I can say no so fast. What do you got? He goes, life-size wax Planet of the Apes, 4 of them. And I was like, I'll take it. You don't want to hear how much they are? Nope. I just want you to send her to my house and send me a bill. Because sometimes the stuff just comes and you can't say no. But then I have I knew Fred Gwynn, and I have the only Herman Munster doll signed by Fred Gwynn because I was the only one with balls big enough to bring it to him when we were doing a movie and go, Fred, would you sign my doll? He was like, why would you have this? I said, oh, it's from my collection. Oh my goodness. You know what it said? And then he told me everything it said. I'm Herman Munster. I like the Beatles. He like remembered all of it.
That's
Um,
amazing.
so there's stuff like that that's irreplaceable. I did that show. It was unfortunate because I didn't get to meet Blair. I did that show, Collector's Call. And I just wanted to meet the actress because I just think she's dynamite. And but it was right when COVID hit. And so we had to do it on Zoom like this.
Mhm.
It was a bit exasperating. But I hated on that show, they kept saying, and it's worth how much? And I should have said, I'll do the show, but you got to cut in there one time, me saying, I don't care what it's worth. I'm never selling it. Doesn't matter what it's worth. I'm not selling it.
I agree with that because I always have people, as I collect comics, and so do my colleagues and friends, and people who don't collect comics are always saying, wow, you must have thousands of dollars. I'm like, yeah, thousands of dollars, because that's what I've spent over the years. But they're like, well, what are these worth? They must be worth a lot of money. I'm like, I don't intend on selling them, so it really doesn't matter how much they're worth. So yeah, I'm sure I have some comics that are worth far more than what I paid for them, but if I'm not going to sell them, it doesn't matter. So
Doesn't matter. And I think it's important to say now, another thing that has great value and that never loses value is the shotgun that you have in your home, that you keep handy if anybody ever comes and tries to take your magazines
exactly,
and comic books.
that
You
too.
that's not always, that never goes down in value. Yeah, it's just such a weird thing because I guess that's our, isn't that sad? That's our society.
Yeah.
What's it worth? What's it worth?
Wanted to jump to Munsters real quick because I want to be mindful of your time. But so I just watched again with my kids, and
the 7-year-olds,
yes,
did they like Grandpa?
they did.
Yeah.
Because I had to tell them, I was like, I want to make sure I watch, and I kind of fresh in my head. And my daughter's like, but Daddy, you watched it already. I'm like, but no, I'm talking to him later. She was like, what? And then my oldest, she was like, who's that? I said, oh, do you remember a movie that we used to watch called Cody Banks? And she was like, what the fuck? Blew her mind.
Cody
I had
Banks' dad.
my 27-year-old, my 7-year-old, they're just like, what? So yeah,
The other 7-year-old doesn't like movies.
Oh, he does. He just wasn't in the room at the time. No, he watched it as well, but
kid, that's the kid I want. I want that kid.
oh no, he digs it. He digs it.
Isn't it smart that I'm smart enough? I look, the Matlock fans are dying. I bring in the Cody Banks fans. Now they're getting a little old. The Quince fans are a little older than Cody Banks fans.
Yep.
And now, see, the great thing that Rob gave us with the Munsters is he gave us a family movie. And I'm telling you, kids love that movie. Adults love that movie. The only people that don't love that movie are idiots. No, I didn't mean that. The only people that don't love the movie are curmudgeons. Because there's nothing in the movie that you wouldn't like. Maybe you think it's too colorful or whatever, but it's a Munsters movie for today's audience.
And I'll be honest with you, when I first heard it, I'm like, oh damn, like there's so many remakes, and I love the series, but then I started hearing things about it, and to be quite honest with you, I don't have a whole lot of time aside from watching kids shows, it seems nowadays. But I was like, guys, let's watch, please. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the hell out of it. And
thank you so much.
I genuinely mean that. And it was fun because I honestly didn't know what to expect going into it. I didn't know it was like there were elements of it, like it seems like it takes place out of time. It has elements from
You're very right. Yes.
You
all
kinds that. Of yeah.
Wait,
I mean,
no, it's purposely out of time. That's Rob's genius. That's like, look, you could watch House of a Thousand Corpses and think, is this the 70s or is this the 90s? But that's kind of a smart way to make a movie. Yeah, purposely, because it's not modern, but we're in cars, but then there's telephones, and then there's
Like the news comes
TV.
on,
We
they're
watch
in the
TV.
70s outfits or something,
Right.
but like, you know, like Count Orlok is like disco dancing. And I'm like, holy shit. First of all, the fact that Count Orlok was in it, I was like,
Right.
wow, these are deep cuts. The fact that they're cramming
That's
all
right.
these,
And
you know, that was so
Uncle
cool.
Gilbert and Lester and Zombo, and the fact, like, Grandpa sitting there, he's watching Abbott and Costello.
Yes.
Now, I want to tell you something. I didn't know what he was going to put on the TV. And it was so weird that the week before I went to see the movie the first time that he showed it to me, I had just watched Abbott and Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So I had just seen it for no reason. I put it on. I was like, geez, Rob, I just watched this 4 days ago. Crazy.
That was one of my, and
It's
so
crazy.
I'm watching that, and that came on, and it was crazy because one of the earliest memories I have with my dad is sitting on his lap watching Abbott and Costello, and it was, you know, it was all those like crossover Abbott and Costello episodes that just, you know, would stick in my head, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. So I was like, all right,
Yeah,
I'm sold.
Isn't
And I
that,
thought, so
I'm
I was
so
waiting
glad
for
that
someone to like die bloody, really bloody in it. Since it was Rob Zombie, I
never
was like,
happened.
it's not going to happen in this.
And I just did not know why people didn't like you. Still, if you go on right now and you type in, somebody has a picture of, like, you know, this will be a picture.
Yeah.
And the next thing someone will say, gosh, I love that movie. And the next thing someone writes is, the movie was crap. And I made a whole video. I welcome you to look at it. You could just look down my social media couple, maybe a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. We talked about that, and where I realized that we were literally letting those bums at Facebook divide us. Because I can tell you, 50% of the people didn't hate the Munsters. 2% of the people hated the Munsters. But the way they roll their comments in, you would think, like I said, how come if you say you like something, it says, you know, we've chosen the most relevant comments. The next comment is, I hated it, because they're trying to cause derision in our country. You, the father of 2 7-year-olds, you more than anybody. My kids are already ruined. They're brats. But you have these beautiful little kids, and you got to remind them that everything they see is a lie. And the only one they can trust is you and mom and their older sister. And that's it.
That's what we're working on, actually. We actually had a very similar conversation.
No, it's
seriously.
It's a full-time job, because they go to school, and you could be the most non-political, loving family, and they go to school and some idiot teacher says something to them that sticks, and they're like, well, the teacher said it. And it's like, well, the teacher's an idiot, and I'm your parent, and I'm the one who tells you. All you have to do is, you don't have to believe what I believe. I used to say to my kids, but you're not gonna be followers into somebody else's crap. You know. Anyway.
No, I agree.
But isn't it funny that those of us, we grew up with this, and now we're in charge of making sure that the other kid can just enjoy this like you and I did. You played with your Transformers or your Superman doll, and you didn't care anything about who. The last thing you cared about was who the president was, or the environment, or any of this other stuff, which no child, or sexuality, no child in America, in the world, should have to worry about that stuff. They should just be able to be kids who love life. That's all they got to be concerned about. Yeah. Don't worry about it.
I agree. So one last thing before we go, and I know you said you.
I'm sorry. Did I talk too much?
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I talked way too much.
No, I think I could talk to you for another hour or so, but I won't, because I know you have stuff going on. So I know you
sold. If you have relevant, ask me anything. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I have my questions. I'll stick to that for now. So I know, you've kind of parted ways with a good portion of your collection. And I have also gotten to a point where I'm like, I need to stop because I have more important things I need to focus on. But is there one thing, and I know you mentioned that you had the Planet of the Apes that you kind of did not say no to. But is there one thing that you have in the back of your head that you think that I want to get my hands on that at some point in my life because
still to
of
this day.
X, Y?
Um, I don't think so.
No.
I think it'll find me if it wants me. It'll find me.
Okay.
There's nothing so let's talk about this a second. This is Captain Action.
Mhm.
And this is a mint costume resewn into a the miracle of modern science says we can make a reproduction box.
Mhm.
Now, this in a box would be a couple $1,000s.
Yeah.
Oddly, one found me the other day. I just turned on eBay and there was one for a couple $100s. And I thought, oh, that one's mine because it's mine. So I have all these like this. Now, I'm not going to spend $4,000, $6,000 to have all these mint. I not because I have them all in the repro box. So maybe in the old days there was that. I have every piece of Captain Action that was known to me. There was a raft, like this thing, the Captain Action raft.
Mhm.
Well, we never saw it. I don't need it. It wasn't anything I had as a kid. It wasn't anything we talked about as a kid. So I don't need it. So I don't really think so. I think this stuff has a way of look, if we're talking collector to collector to collector, the stuff has a way of finding you. And when I sold stuff, I had hundreds and hundreds of Don Post masks. And it was never important to me to be the biggest collector. It was only important to me to have a nice collection and then to share it. Because that's what Forey Ackerman did, and that's what Bob Burns did. And they were very good mentors to me in how to be this guy. But I had something that Forey Ackerman didn't have, and Bob Burns didn't have, and Vern Langdon didn't have, and Basil Gogos didn't have. I had kids. None of them had kids. So the creators of all this stuff we loved
Yep.
didn't have any responsibility beyond their own selves. But once you have the kids, man, it's a whole nother thing. So what I would say to a collector out there, somebody watching this, only ever collect for what makes you happy.
Mhm.
You've heard that before.
Yeah.
Don't ever collect for value. Because they figured that out in when I don't think it was Star Wars first, when Star Trek put out those playtime toys in the 1980s for Next Generation. Someone can correct me here. I think that was the first time they started numbering your toy. And
Oh,
people
really?
were like trying to get number 200. But it's
Did the numbers
number
matter,
what
or
it's
they were just arbitrary
I
numbers?
don't know, but somebody was smart enough to go, let's number them. That'll make them collectible. Well, then younger people don't realize we all lived through the death of Superman, and you could buy the comic sealed mint, and you could buy this version and that version. And people, you've got one there. I'll bet it's right here. It's right behind me. Right. So people went out.
Everything fell. Yeah, this is a
People went out.
reissue that I had
Oh, that's a
signed
reissue.
of the recent 30th anniversary of with one of the artists who signed it, Jerry Ordway.
So that's 30 years ago already, the death of Superman?
Yeah.
Wow,
Long-
that blows my mind.
Yes.
So we lived through all of it, and everybody went out and bought those. They bought the original ones, and they
Yeah.
were convinced they
We're
were
gonna
millionaires.
We're gonna retire on that.
But you got to take the reason these are $4,000 is wait. I actually have pictures that a friend sent me, and I got them to send to my brother, and I haven't sent them yet. Oh gosh, this is too good to be true. You guys, like these are the pictures you wait your whole life for. The reason, is this gonna be big enough? The reason that that's $4,000 is because in 1969, that's what some guy was doing to all of them. Look, they're all on the floor and opened, and the dad is that dad. And by the way, that would have been my dad sitting there Christmas morning without a shirt on. But this guy's absolutely from Pennsylvania. I can tell you that right now. But they only have value because people rip them open. So buy nothing that no one's going to rip open. Find old stuff that people rip open. That's what has value.
I absolutely agree. I mean, the stuff that's out now, people just, case in point, Funko Pops. I will say, I had a few months there where I bought a fair amount of those. And now I'm at a point, I'm like, I got to get rid of all these because they're just taking up space. At no point will these ever become anything more than just big-headed figures. They will not be worth anything because there's so many of them that are created. They're cute to look at, but that's all there is. That's all there is. I mean, every brand or IP has a pop for it.
Except Grandpa Munster, Daniel Roebuck. Now, when they do the count, maybe I'll be on their side. But until we do the count, I would welcome it. But there's a sameness to all of it. We all wonder, like, this is so great to have. This is simple. And all the cards were different. So some were orange, some were purple, some were red, some were blue. And when we were kids, you would see those all in a row. And also when you were kids, it's hard to determine here, but this is a good version of showing it. When you were a kid, this was as big as half your body.
Yeah, those are huge.
They were huge. When you were a kid, this was like going over and picking up the TV, carrying it around. And it's like, Mom. But it's simple and it jumps at you. The shelf bounce, they call that. It jumps at you. And it didn't require 700 things there. It only required to draw your eye to the thing. And even the sculpture of the mask, these were I don't think Kirby did any of the drawings, but it's a sin that in this moment I can't remember. But it was a famous guy who did all the art drawings.
Well, that looks like the Captain America looks like it was pulled from a Jack Kirby cover.
It did, but I think it was somebody else was mocking up
okay.
Somebody else had to come in and redo them.
Okay.
And it's a famous guy, and every Captain Action guy knows it, and I'm a schnook that I don't. I love that I had these pictures when you see other kids at Christmas morning, and they got everything, it's just great. But that was, I don't know, the Funko Pops are they're like Beanie Babies. It's all the same.
Yeah.
When my kids were young, like your kids, that was our thing. We would go to the Disney store. It was a huge deal. Or Disneyland, where we went all the time. And they got to pick, each of them got one of those things. But, there's a set of 3. Oh, and then my ex-wife, she would one. And then I'd buy a set. Here they are in spacesuits. Well, you know what we did with those Beanie Babies? My brother-in-law was in Iraq serving this country. And one day I had this epiphany that they were valueless to us. But imagine what they would mean to a little kid in Iraq who lives in a war zone.
Yeah.
So you could get, in the government, you could take these boxes that whatever the size was, and you could put 100 pounds in it, and it cost something. We filled so many of those boxes, and we sent them to my brother-in-law in Iraq, and he gave them all away to kids in Iraq. Oh,
that's amazing.
Get a little emotional. Instead of throwing them out, which is what they, the toy could still be, instead of being collected, it was held and loved and played with.
Oh, people don't do that now. People don't do that now with stuff.
Yeah. So the toy actually served its purpose. But what's great about this guy is somebody did play with him for many years. And then, he went to Vietnam, or he discovered girls. And then his mom put him in a box. And then one day his mom died and the box went to somewhere and someone found it. And now I have it.
It's in good
Because
condition too.
he's very well with the Captain Action. What's great is when they're tight. Like this arm is a little loose, but
Yeah.
his legs are very tight, which means he wasn't played with a lot. Because Captain Action was a man of 1,001 positions. That's what it said in the box. So this is what he was always like.
Multiple points of articulation.
That's how you play with a toy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where can people find that? That's what I would love to know.
They can find it on Facebook if they come to danielroebuck.com. This is the kind of stuff that. So I've been going to these conventions, Joe, and I didn't want to just be there. I wanted to have stuff that people would want. So this was designed so it could be autographed.
Okay.
And then there were statues, but I sent 5 to this great painter and he painted them for me. And they're just so silly.
Oh,
and
I would
so
totally get that.
yeah, find me on Facebook. But Joe, now we're talking. It's awkward me taking money.
That's fine.
We'll
Don't mind.
We'll figure it out. And then these you can find. I have these 2 where you can go to like Amok Time Toys, and you've seen maybe they've showed what the other NECA figures look like.
Yeah.
And I've actually seen the box art. And I was asked not to put my unveiling out yet until things come. The NECA toys are.
That's cool.
You can see my unboxing of this on social media.
Oh, okay.
This is the first time that I was a nodder for an official nodder for Lost. But now I want you to think of the absurdity. I've got, shelves and shelves of Universal Monsters. Got shelves and shelves of the Munsters, Universal Monsters. I should be a little more erudite, I think, but I can't really fake it. I'm just thrilled about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So before we go, I know
Yes, sir.
you're getting ready for Munsters in London, you said.
Yeah, Munsters. We're doing a lot of promotion of Munsters in London these next few days.
What can we look forward to from you that may be coming out that you can actually talk about? Because I know you probably
Yes,
have
of course. Well, I invite people. Look, I work for the man whenever I can because the man pays my bills. But when I'm not working for the man, I'm running a not-for-profit with my wife and my friends called A Channel of Peace.
Okay.
And people go to achannelofpeace.org and they can see we've been making faith-based family movies. By the way, faith-based, not Jesus. They're movies that, honestly, I should just say they're family movies. They're movies you'll be able to watch with the 7-year-old and the 27-year-old, because the real key is how do we entertain people? I don't need to preach to anybody. They can go to church. I'm not a preacher. I'm a filmmaker. So I make an entertaining movie, and the movie, when you watch it, you go, gee, that guy solved his problem. How did he do it? Oh, he used faith in a higher power to do the right thing. So you can see that I have so many movies coming out. Oh my gosh. Probably 7 or 10 or 12. I work a lot, thank God. And genre specific, which is great. Sci-fi movie called Colonials coming out. I wish I could say, if I just wish, I had to phrase this correctly, if only you had seen Grease Dritus in the trailer for Jedi Survivor.
Oh.
I would be able to say whether he was in it or not.
Oh, right.
But it seems weird that one of the stars of the original game wouldn't be around, but
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about it.
Fair enough.
But Joe, God is good. I am busy. I am always busy. We're starting a new movie called Tuesday's Flu, which I'm writing. Excuse me, not writing. Pardon me. Written by the Perry brothers. I'm not writing it. Directing, producing, starring in, and then we'll continue make. We've got a movie coming out in the spring called Lucky Louie, which I wrote and directed with my daughter.
Okay.
And can I tell you what it's about? Do you have 1
Absolutely.
second?
Absolutely.
That was about an old retired cop who can't solve a bank robbery that happened in 1971. It's been bugging him since the 70s. So he finally teams up with his Bible study, and the Bible study is 4 ex-cons that he had arrested and rehabilitated. And together, they decide they're going to try to figure out the bank robbery. Then the old cop gets sick, goes in the hospital, and my character says, "Why don't we just rob the bank again, and then we'll know where the money went?" Because we're all criminals. So it's great how we do that. It turns into a turkey trot, like the whole town is in on the bank robbery, cheering them on so they can try to solve the question. So that's in the fall, and then in the spring, I'm sorry, that's in the spring. In the fall, the Hail Mary, and the Hail Mary is about a nun who finds a guy who's in desperate need of redemption. And so she cons him into creating a football team for her all boys Catholic school so that he will be led to it. And that I think is that might be the best thing I've ever done in my life. I think it speaks very well of our need for forgiveness and tolerance. Redemption is possible for everybody, everybody. And no matter how far down you go, you could always come back. So that's what that's about.
That sounds great. I love the message. There we go. I just want to close and thank you so much for your time, because you've been just an absolute pleasure to talk to. And I will say that I've never interviewed someone who is in TV or film, a star of any kind. So I was very nervous, and it was just a pleasure talking to you. So thank you so much.
Well, let's do it again. We'll have.
And we're back. How cool is Daniel Roebuck? It was great talking to someone who's been in the business of show, as they say, for so long, and he's so humble and just interesting and down to earth. He has an amazing horror collection. As you saw, he has a great action figure collection as well. If you get a chance, Google Daniel Roebuck and horror collection, because you'll see pictures of his extensive collection. Unfortunately, as he said, he had to sell off a good portion of it just because he had to move on with his life. But that being said, he was a great person to talk to. Also, get a chance, check out his nonprofit website, a channelofpeace.com, and check out the content there.
Yeah, between him and Bill Leff, quite a collection of toys and things that these guys have. And Daniel, like you said, such a nice guy to take the time to talk to us. He's a very busy man. We'd love to have him back on. And again, Joe, fantastic job.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're really expanding our horizons here, from comic artists and writers to those involved in our childhood cartoons to now actors. Who knows? Maybe directors, media moguls. The sky's the limit here. So again, I will echo, great job, Joe. Daniel Roebuck was a fantastic guest. Would love to have him on again, and other of his acting brethren and sisterhood. So hopefully we'll get more folks on the show. But we wanted to end this episode, as we do sometimes, with a review reading from Apple Podcasts. This was a 5-star review from back in November from a person named Klaus's cousin. Headline is, "Now this is a podcast I can get behind." Very happy to have discovered this great podcast. Much like Word Balloon, these are great one-on-one interviews with industry professionals. So much more entertaining and interesting than a majority of podcasts, where it's just basically some fans sitting around giving their trivial 2 cents opinions. This is great stuff. Please keep it going. Highly recommended for any true comic book fan. Well, thank you, Klaus's cousin. Maybe you can get Klaus himself to write a review. We would be appreciative. Thank you for listening. Please be like Klaus's cousin and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever. And we will see you next time.